leave you up front. Yeah. Yep. The board meeting will now come to order at 5:01 p.m. Good evening, and thank you for attending the Albuquerque Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board meeting today on March 12th, 2026. Ms. Barilla, can I get a member roll call vote? Member roll call, please.
Sander Bullionitz.
Present.
Eduardo Budanaro.
Present.
Aaron Calderon.
Present.
Rowan Wymark. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. And then for the record, Member Wymark, was excused. But with that being said, I do want to announce that this would have been Rowan's last board meeting. She has been with the board for a full term, for 3 years, and she was served on the PBRB, the Policy Review Board Committee, and a lot of other subcommittees, and so we really appreciate the work that she did with the CPC and the CPOA board. She will be missed. So thank you, Rowan, for your service here. The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you very much. And then we do want to also give a moment of silence for the BCSO officer who tragically lost his life last week, Sergeant Michael Schlotman. Thank you very much. The next order of business is the approval of the agenda. Do any board members have any changes to the agenda? The one change I do have, since Member Wymark did have a case, we're going to postpone her case, which is APD case 25-0034-031 to next month. You guys are in agreement with that? Yes. Then, Ms. Barilla, I make a motion that we make APD case, or we suspend the case APD case 25-003-4031 to next month. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budanaro. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Budanaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next order of business is the review and approval of minutes. We do have two minutes we need to approve, but the first one up is from February 12th, 2026, which was our regular board meeting. Board members, any changes to the minutes as written? No. All right, then I make a motion that the minutes for February 12th, 2026 be approved as written. May I get a second, please?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Budanaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next meeting, or next minutes that need to be approved, which was our special meeting on Tuesday, February 24th, 2026, where we reviewed the use of force policies. Do any of the board members have any changes to the minutes for that day? No. Then I make a motion that the minutes be approved as written for February 24th, 2026 special meeting. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Member Budanaro. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bullionitz.
Approved.
Member Budanaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Brittle. The next order of business is the report from city departments. First up is APD, the Internal Affairs Professional Standards Department with Major Tony Camacho. I will get it right. I will get it right. Maybe not every time, but at least one time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. So tonight, there was a little bit of confusion. I guess they sent you a brand new IAPS report for the month. So you guys should have that, but I'll just kind of go over it. Because the numbers were a little off. Apparently one of the systems didn't feed into another, technology. So the total cases are still 18. Total cases completed are 21. And the cases opened by the area commands this month were 5. And there was 1 completed case for that. Pending cases still remains at 76, and the average days to completion is 93. Moving on to the next section, we did have them change it just a little bit in the sense that on the bottom section for directives and SOPs, they weren't aligned. So to make it a little bit clearer, it really should kind of be flip-flopped. So personnel code of conduct, out of the 9 completed investigations, 5 of those were sustained. Use of body recording devices, out of the 4, 3 were sustained. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. And then just on down, I guess. So when you're looking at complaints involving department personnel, there's 3 cases, and 2 of those were sustained. It's supposed to be the top 5, but as you can tell on the bottom sections, they're all the same numbers. So it ended up being 7 because the last 4 were all 2s for the cases completed. The section that was talking about personnel code of conduct, I took that out just because I don't think that makes any sense to you guys. It doesn't have any clear delineation as to what those SOPs are. So they are just included in the personnel code of conduct, which is the 5 that were sustained. For the ESIs, I will say that we are waiting for permissions to add those to the report. So I am hoping to be able to get those by next board meeting. But as of now, they have not been included. I will say that that probably, as I said last month, feeds into the lower case numbers that we have overall, because a lot of them, the lower sanction violations are being pushed out as ESIs. So we should have some numbers hopefully next month that reflect that a little bit better for you all. Do you all have any questions for me regarding anything in the report?
I was just curious about clarifying, when somebody's got a ESI for use of a body cam device, is that because it's happened repeatedly?
No,
when it gets
actually,
to that level, or is that
the
the first
opposite. So an ESI, the enhanced supervisory intervention, is for lower class sanctions where there are 3 or fewer violations in the sanction 6 and the sanction 7. So essentially, when you have lower sanction violations, we're giving the opportunity to the supervisors to be able to train, coach, and mentor those people in those violations. So an ESI is actually the lower end.
Thank you, Commander. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Major Camacho.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
I just give
The next report will be from the Internal Affairs Force Division. Commander Norris is not able to make it tonight, but there was the report in there. Did any board members have any questions that we want to put on the table for Commander Norris?
No.
Nope.
I'm good.
All right. The next report up is from ACS with Executive Director Diane McDermott.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, Deputy Director Bustamante was unable to attend tonight. He did forward through the ACS Violence Prevention and Intervention Program report, as well as their overall report. Did send that to, I there's a lot there, so the board did receive it. One announcement he did want me to pass along to the public and the board, was the Seasons of Nonviolence Easter egg hunt, which is going to be taking place on March 28th. So pay attention to the calendar and their website for that information. But anyway, he wanted me to make sure that that was passed along, and I can try and answer any questions on the reports, or we can table them over to next month when he's able to come.
Thank you, Executive Director. Board members, any questions? No? Awesome. Thank you so much. The next report up is from the City Attorney, Lindsay Roseborough, the Managing Attorney.
Good evening, Board. A few quick things for you. Because it has been mentioned previously, I'm bringing up again, there is a pending case, a criminal case before the New Mexico Supreme Court. The city filed an amicus brief in front of the court brief to explain to the parties and to the justices how these issues involving inventory searches impact officers and impact the city. That was filed. The case is still pending. This has been discussed at length before this board only because of the impacts on policy that it's had on APD. So I thought it was worth mentioning. I shared the brief with your policy analyst, who I told can share with the board as well if there's any interest to read that. But that has been filed. There was an ongoing, or there was a case in district court this week involving APD. Today, the city secured a directed verdict in favor of the city. And so that means the case is getting dismissed. It was resolved in favor of the city. The charges, the negligence claim was dismissed. And the other thing to note in the area of litigation is that the litigation reports are going to City Council next week on the agenda. That will include information about settlements. And of course, that involves settlements involving APD. If that is of interest to the board, I can certainly, have myself or the executive director or somebody share that with the board to have some information about those settlements. But you can keep a lookout for that. That'll be before City Council next week, I believe. And that's all.
Thank you so much. I will speak for myself that I want to get to know some of only for the APD with those settlement cases. That's the only part that I care about. So, so if you or Executive Director McDermott can forward those on to the board around the APD settlements, that would be wonderful.
Yes, of course.
Perfect. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Any questions for? All right. The next up is City Council by Chris Sylvan. City Council citizens.
Thank you, Chair. Board, Chris Sylvan, Albuquerque City Council. The update that I have for you this month is OC 26-4, the appointment of Mr. Ricardo Reichfeld to the board. That's going to be heard at the council meeting on Monday. So looking forward to getting another appointment to the board. I appreciate the agency giving me a heads up and saying that, let's go ahead and have Mr. Reichfeld attend this meeting so that we can knock that checklist off. So he's already officially.
For the record, he is in attendance. So
right.
just for the record too, he's also in attendance. So he is complying with that.
So we've got that part done and check that off, and everything should go well. And then the following week, I guess it is the same week, we will be interviewing 2 more applicants to the board, and we'll see which one go on to the counselors. Any questions?
Oh yeah, you were on the consent. I just wanted to make sure Aaron was on or Vice Chair Calderon was on the consent agenda last month, I believe. So I just was remembering that.
This will be on the consent agenda unless the counselor pulls it off.
Cool. Okay. Perfect. Any questions for Mr. Silverman? No? Awesome. Thank you so much. The next order of business is the report from the Community Policing Council by Mr. Kelly Mensa.
Good evening, Honorable Chair Oleanics, Honorable Board, everyone in attendance, APD, city employees, CPO, and staff, and everyone else. We've had a busy month since the last meeting. We've gotten a lot of other things done, I believe. We had our annual mayor's meeting with the mayor and the police staff for all council officers, and that took place on a Wednesday night in late February. This is one of the benefits afforded to us through our city council ordinance. And officers from all 7 councils showed up, including the youth council, so we had good attendance. Interim Chief Barker was supposed to attend, but she had to cancel at the last minute. She's had an illness problem. And representing APD were DC's Langwood, Norris, and Jones, speaking about their areas, which was productive. The mayor arrived at about 6:40 and gave us a state of city law enforcement address. We then asked 8 questions on a variety of topics, including city law, enforcement concerns with blind and physically challenged residents, juvenile crime, law enforcement, aspects of homelessness that deal with law enforcement, and the DWI affair. Finally, we asked of what help this specifically the CPC could be to the mayor and to the city, and he indicated that we would do a good job of speaking to the city council, getting more involved with the city council, and also keeping close ties with the legislature, writing letters, that sort of thing. So we're going to take that responsibility a little more seriously. The Valley Policing Council invited ACS and APD's Metro Support Division to speak about homelessness. That was one of our meetings last month. Angelo of the University of the CPC is also running the youth CPC, and he did a recent city job fair. He got 11 young people from 15 to about 22 to sign up, saying that they're interested in what the youth CPC is doing, and we had our first meeting to get to meet each other. We've got some plans as far as doing field trips and that kind of stuff with the youth. In the Council of Chairs this month, we discussed a few topics, including, first of all, doing a possible special event. We've done 2 of them in the past. We have not done one recently, so we may be going back to that. The city's legal update on our lobbying proposal, we got information on that. We shared it with the council and discussed it. Member Brandon Kaiser had a proposal on focused advertising instead of doing the general advertising through the media we've been doing, which has not been particularly fruitful for us. And we also discussed yearly reports. All meetings in March have Chief Barker scheduled to present. So far, the first 3 have gone well. She has engaged the audiences. We've had good discussion, and I think she's done a good job representing her philosophies and what she wants to do. And on Saturday, I will be doing a school resource fair at Garfield Middle School. They said there should be hundreds of people there. Hopefully, we can meet some more interested people from the Valley Area Command who maybe want to sign up or at least attend the meetings. That is my report for the month. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mensa. Board members, any questions, Mr. Mensa? No? Mr. Mensa, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
All right, have a good evening.
All right. The next order of business is going to be the report from the CPOA with the Executive Director, Diane McDermott.
All right, thank you, Chair. The CPOA received 77 complaint intakes from February 1st to February 28th. 25 of those were assigned for investigation between CPOA or the ones appropriately already with IA. 22 were driving complaints that were resolved with supervisor. 23 were miscellaneous, where either insufficient information was provided or it was determined APD personnel were not involved in the complaint or the complaint was resolved to the citizen's satisfaction due to seeking information. 7 were submitted for some form of mediation, 3 of which were like formal mediation, 4 of which were informal mediation. And then we received 2 commendations. The CPOA had our contract mediation team in town the week of the February 23rd through the 25th. They met with APD executive staff. They did a meeting training session with the CPOA staff, and it's a growing program, and so the APD and CPOA are working together to develop that even further. The lobby build out for the CPOA and mediation space is already or nearly complete. So we will be able to provide better in-person servicing for the community once that's completed. A new investigator started with the agency on 3/9, and then another one is going to be starting on 3/23. Unfortunately, we had another investigator that had to depart, so we still have 2 vacancies. A potential board member, as you've already heard, is in the audience observing the meeting, so his appointment will be on March 16th. And then again, much like the board, we would like to thank Member Rowan Weimark for her service to the CPOAB. She has been involved with APD reform efforts for a very long time. She first served with the Community Policing Councils and then joined the board. She has been a pleasure to work with, and she was a founding member of the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board when it shifted. And we do wish her the best, and sadly she could not be here tonight. So that's all for my report.
Any questions for?
Okay, so moving on to the non-concurrences. So there were several non-concurrences that seem daunting. It's not as much as it seems, though. So the first I will address, though, is the two that were a change in findings. So CPC 193-24, this is regarding a change in finding from sustained to exonerated for SOP 115A1, which states Department personnel shall treat the public with respect, courtesy, and professionalism at all times. The CPOA investigation determined an APD's initial review upheld a sustained finding for a sergeant who used unprofessional language while describing a complainant on scene. The comments were not made in the presence of the complainant, but rather to fellow officers. APD in the past has taken the position in other cases, and CPOA has agreed that derogatory language about a complainant is the same as saying it in their presence if it's captured on OBRD, because the complainant can obtain those comments through the IPRA process. Additionally, the officer's negative assessment of a complainant may be perceived even if direct insults are not given. During the appeal in this particular case, though, of potential discipline, concerns about perceived negative attitudes were raised, but I neglected to reinforce the IPRA and consistency aspects in the discussion. So in this case, the sergeant did not make or display outwardly dismissive comments in the complainant's presence, so the superintendent did overturn the findings. The next one is CPC 307, and that is, again, regarding a change in findings from sustained to exonerated for SOP 264C1B, which states, identify the involved persons and witnesses and attempt to interview those subjects if an interview can be completed. If an interview cannot be completed, it shall be documented in the officer's report. So the Office of Police Reform has taken a newer position on this issue from one that they'd previously held. Previously, one of the commanders there had said the SOP of 260 was utilized for for PSAs. And even though it was informed that the SOP talks about criminal investigations, it was still applicable. However, through a refinement of the process, it is no longer considered applicable. The department is trying to divide the SOPs more clearly in terms of what applies to PSAs and what applies to other officers. So we've used it in the past, IA has used it in the past, but now moving forward, we will be using a different SOP basically when it's feasible. So change in outlook on these things. The next one, any question? I guess I should ask any questions before I move on to the others? Okay. So the rest of them are all discipline changes. And so CPC 2625, the professional integrity determined that a particular violation was a misconduct violation rather than a performance violation. That changed the baseline of what the discipline would have been, and then the department reduced it down to the minimum for that. So it was within the range, but not in the range because of the change in discipline versus, performance versus misconduct, but that was the difference. 5425 applied the reduction due to the discipline. A special order came out that capped the number of hours that somebody could receive for a particular type of violation. So the department used that cap basically for the reduction. 6525, there was basically a double reduction in discipline. There was an additional and then a reduction again based on mitigating factors that were raised by the officer during the discipline process. And then 111, 121, 132, and 144 were all basically a utilization of the new, as you just heard from the major, the ESI process. That is not on the official chart yet, so it should be added whenever they next do the revision, but that element is new, and so therefore it kind of generates a non-concurrence even if it's within the range, if that makes sense. Especially on 144.25, again, there was a little bit of a difference in terms of the miscalculation of the DAP. Originally, the on-body recording violations were always considered a misconduct. the department has since shifted. If it's an unintentional failure to record, it's a performance issue. If it's an intentional recording, it's still a misconduct issue. So there was a period of time in which the department was sometimes not retroactively putting it on that change, and sometimes it were, so now it's been cleared up. But in this instance, it was a it's still a misconduct issue in that time because it occurred prior to that special order. So, any questions?
Thank you. No. No, thank you. Thank you a lot, Executive Director.
Yeah.
All right. The next order of business is public comments. Ms. Pearl, I don't believe we have any written or anyone signed up for public comments. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Awesome. All right. So now the next order of business is the appeal section. And the first appeal we have up is CPC 109-25, Ms. Sandra Acosta. Are you present? Or Ms. Acosta, are you present? Okay, perfect. If you want to come up to the microphone real quick, but before we start, we're going to have our legal counsel read off a spiel of the process here. So please step up here and just then we'll turn it over to legal to outline the appeal process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're now at the appeals portion of the agenda, and the following process will be followed during each appeal. During the appeal hearing, each interested party has an opportunity to be heard and present arguments stating their position. No new evidence will be permitted to be introduced during the appeal hearing. The hearing today is a quasi-judicial hearing, and the decisions will be made by the members of this board. The scope of this appeal will be limited to the complaint and the findings of the investigation that followed. If parties during their presentation go outside of this scope, they may be directed by the chair that the only arguments that will be considered by the board are those relating to the complaint and subsequent investigation. We are recording this meeting tonight so that a complete, clear record can be created of everything said. However, please remember that we cannot create an accurate record with people talking over one another. If people start to talk over each other, the chair may call for order so there can be a clear record of the hearing. The time limits for the hearing are as follows: 15 minutes for the complainant who requests the appeal or their representative, 10 minutes for the CPOA director or their designee, 5 minutes for the police officer if he or she is present, 10 minutes for representative APD, and then 5 minutes for the complainant or representative to provide a short rebuttal to anything that has been presented by the other parties. The burden of proof is upon the complainant bringing the appeal to demonstrate either 1, a policy was misapplied in the evaluation of the complaint, or 2, that the findings or recommendations of the director were arbitrary, capricious, or constituted an abuse of discretion, or 3, that the findings or recommendations of the director were not consistent with the record evidence. These are the only bases upon which the board may modify or change the findings or recommendations of the director. At the end of each party's presentation, the board will be given the opportunity to ask questions. These questions do not count against the party's presentation time. However, the questions should be focused on clarifying the record or the argument given and should not offer or invite new information or evidence from a board member through asking the question. Parties should remain respectful and professional during their presentation. Any disruption of another party's presentation shall not be tolerated. At the close of the hearing, the board will deliberate. The board may make a determination in open session or decide to deliberate in closed session as allowed by the New Mexico Open Meetings Act. All final decisions by the board will be made in public. Once a decision is made, a final written notice of decision will be provided to all interested parties as provided for in the CPOA ordinance. And as just a final reminder to all the speakers, please do not refer to the officers by their full name. Just use the officer and then an initial. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. APD, I believe you are present here, correct? Is the officer? Nope. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Ms. Acosta, do you understand the time limits, how we can make the decision, and also not to use the officer's name, just officer and then first initial, last name?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Ms. Acosta, your 15 minutes starts now.
So the story when the officer went over, he had told me that he was gonna make sure that I didn't call the cops again. That he was gonna go to the police station and tell him not to answer my phone, and he was just really rude. And that's why I called and reported him through the 911 call. But that was about it. There was no violence or. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Acosta. Board members, do we have any questions for Ms. Acosta? Ms. Acosta, you still have a few minutes left if you want to use it, but if that's all you have to say, that's okay. I just wanted to at least give you the opportunity.
Well, it was just that,
Okay,
pretty much.
awesome. Well, thank you so much. So next up, Executive Director McDermott. The CPOA has 10 minutes to respond. And then, excuse me one second. Ms. Acosta, if you want to sit, we're going to do kind of the whole spiel. We'll then have APD respond, and then you can come back up as a rebuttal for what the CPOA and APD has to say. So Executive Director McDermott, the 10 minutes for the CPOA starts now.
Okay. Thank you. So the original complaint that we received was that the officer was disrespectful and rude. And then there was an additional element, I'm not sure, that was mentioned here about her not being allowed to call 911. So the concern was that her children were no longer with her due to a previous investigation that had occurred. So CYFD had custody of the children at that time. I know the concern, at least in the original investigation and complaint, was that the officer misrepresented where the children were. The officer, per the interview as well as the OBRD, indicated that the children were placed in essentially a foster care situation, which could be either a stranger type of situation or it could be family. It's all dependent upon CYFD's decision as to where children go once CYFD takes custody of them. Regarding the rudeness, again, we reviewed the on-body recording, we reviewed reports, we reviewed the CADs, we reviewed all the information, and per the on-body recording, which is the most useful information for something like that, there was full recording. The officer was not dismissive, rude. There were times he may have to become stern because Ms. Acosta did not seem to understand some of what was being explained. She was wanting to show the officer the children's home, the rooms and food and things like that, but at that time the officer had no authority or control over where the children were or to bring them back to the house. It was strictly up to CYFD. So he explained that multiple times. When she called 911 again to basically complain or want a different officer to come to the residence, the dispatch sent the call to the officer that was just there. He explained and called her on the phone and explained that he was not able to, again, do anything about bringing the children back. He was not rude to her. He did advise her that if she continued to call 911 for that specific issue, that she could face charges for potential 911 abuse. Not that she could never call again or that there were other concerns or issues. She was not prohibited from that, but for that specific issue, that specific night, there was a potential. So he cautioned her for consequences rather than no yelling, no rudeness. And that pretty much ended the call, and again, covered by all the evidence that's available to all parties. I think that's it.
Thank you, Executive Director. Board member, any questions for the Executive Director and the CPOA? Nope. Awesome. Thank you so much. Now we'll move on to APD, and I believe it is Major Collins here as the APD representation. Is that correct? Perfect. And then just for the record, when you start with your 10 minutes, just state your full name just for the record and rank, just so we have that in record. Of course. All right. Major Collins, your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you. I'm Major James Collins. I'm the Deputy Superintendent in the Office of Police Reform. I'm standing in tonight for Commander Waite, who regrettably couldn't be here. So my job is to review the cases that come through for disciplinary action. In this matter, Commander Waite reviewed this case, Sean Waite reviewed this case, and found that the case was complete, thorough, well documented, and concurred with the CPOA finding of unfounded, because the issue at hand was the rudeness of the officer, and that was not, there was no objective evidence to determine that he was, so we concurred with the CPOA on this one as unfounded.
Thank you, Major Collins. Board members, do you have any questions for Major Collins? Nope.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Acosta, if you want to come back up to the microphone here. So now that you have heard from both the CPOA and APD from their review, you have 5 minutes to use as a rebuttal to respond to the CPOA or APD. Your 5 minutes starts now.
So my kids were with CYFD. I went to court this morning and they closed the case. I got custody again. But I felt like it was uncalled for how he treated me. But that's all I gotta say.
All right, thank you, Mr. Costa. I appreciate your time. So if you want to go, any other questions for Ms. Acosta? No. All right. If you want to take a seat, we will continue on with the process here. All right. So with the conclusion of the testimonies here, I make a motion that the board convenes in a closed session as authorized by the administrative adjudicatory process exempt by the Open Meetings Act for the limited purpose of discussing the matters presented in CPC case 109-25. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, thank you, Member Budenaro. Ms. Burlett, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Burlett. We're now going into closed session. I make a motion to come out of closed session for CPC 109-25. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Brillo, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brillo. Ms. Acosta, do you want to come back up to the podium for the verdict? Is that the decision? Member Budenaro?
Thank you, Chair. During our deliberations, we have determined that the appellant has not met the criteria for modification of the ruling of the CPOA, CPC 109-25. We affirm and uphold the findings of the CPOA director. And Ms. Acosta, we appreciate you joining us this evening, and I hope you'll understand that you will receive written confirmation of all the board's findings. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Counsel?
Mr. Chair, that was a very good recitation of the decision. Perhaps the board would like to do it by motion and vote?
Correct. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to affirm and uphold the findings of the CPOA.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Member Budenaro. Ms. Brillo, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis.
Affirmed.
Member Budenaro.
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Brillo. And thank you, Ms. Acosta, for coming this evening. We appreciate it, and you should have that letter in the mail in the next 30 days.
All right.
So thank you so much.
Am I dismissed?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming tonight. All right. Next up is the appeal for CPC 143-25 by Mr. Robert Lopez. Mr. Lopez, are you here? Awesome. If you could please come up to the podium, that would be wonderful. All right, Mr. Lopez. Our counsel has already kind of read out the whole process for the appeal. Do you want him to go over that process again, or are you comfortable with the route?
I completely understand what's going on.
Perfect. And so first off, your 15 minutes, just as a reminder to not say the officer's name, just say officer, and then first initial of the last name.
Understood.
So your 15 minutes starts now.
My name is Robert Lopez. Thank you for me being here. I am a retired correction officer, did 25 years as a correction officer. I have my own security business here on Central. I moved here about 4 years ago with my girlfriend here on Trumbull. I first met Detective J and Detective I. They came to my house. I have no idea why they came to my house. I live on Trumbull, near Trumbull in Wyoming. My girlfriend's a nurse. We live in a horrible area at the time. In the process, we were getting our house built. I was calling the cops left and right because they were breaking into my vehicle, breaking into our houses, breaking into the neighbors, beating people up in front of my place. Long, story short. Next thing I know, I get 3 detectives and a clinician comes to my house. They came to my house very awkward, very in a line, didn't introduce themselves, very intimidating. It wasn't until I told them that I was a retired correction officer that they started turning their body cameras on. I have everything that I'm telling you about. I have video and audio, everything, because I video and audio everything. The Detective J and Detective I asked me if I wanted some help. I told them, yeah. I didn't know what kind of help they were talking about because I've never been to a mental hospital. I've never been diagnosed with anything like that. I said yes. He gave me his number, gave me his card. I called him for weeks, called him for months, never returned a call. I left horrible messages, voicemails on his message, told him, you're whatever, how could you come to my house, tell me that you're going to offer me help, and then I'm calling, and you're ignoring my calls. I hadn't seen him ever since. I opened up my own business all this time. On March 22nd, I got arrested by the officer who got arrested by the state trooper, Jordan Hernandez, the officer who was drunk doing 100 miles an hour in his patrol car and was arrested by a state trooper. I was arrested by him. I have video of all that in the patrol car. He was drunk. Took me to MDC. He told MDC to put me in a horrible area. They put me in a horrible area in MDC. I retained a lawyer right now, which I do have a lawyer right now out of Dallas for the civil rights. Come on July 9th, I find out Jordan Hernandez is arrested. So that's why I retained a lawyer. It was all over the news. He was the one that arrested me. I retained a lawyer, and that's where we go from there. On July 4th of this year, Detective J and Detective I show up to my house after 4 years. Never heard from him, never seen him. 4 years ago, he took off like a fart in the wind. All of a sudden, 4 years ago, they show up to my house. Reason being, because I have my security business. I work on Central, anywhere between Tramway and Central and Wyoming and Central. I call the cops all the time for reasons. People are starting fires. People are fighting. People are chasing people over the streets with machete. It's not on my property, but I'm allowed to call the cops if there's a crime going on. So he shows up to my house on July 4th saying, hey, you know, and I have that recorded. I have all the recordings that they, on their body cams that I downloaded myself from all the interactions from the police. But they don't have that body camera from July 4th when they showed up to my house. I do. So they asked me if he wants help again. He asked me if I want help again. I said, yeah, I'll take some help. They show up on July 9th to my house. U.S. Marshals, about 30 people, fully armed like I'm like a wanted man. Have no warrants, nothing. I only see, my house has alarms around the house. I only see the 4 officers come to my house. I let them in because I didn't see all the other people around my house. If I would have saw that, I wouldn't have let them in. I would have known. I thought they were I thought they were killing me with kindness. I let them inside my house. If you guys have seen the recordings, I let them inside my house. Things started getting a little weird. It wasn't until I told them, you know what, something's a little weird. I'm gonna get a hold of my lawyer. As soon as I told them that, they arrested me. They arrested me inside my house, took me to UNM hospital, where I was diagnosed, which I wasn't diagnosed. The doctors didn't even see me. I showed them video of everything what the police just did to me at my house. They didn't even diagnose me. They let me go. I called the Detective J and Detective I, and I said, they let me go. They said, what? They let you go out of that place? They were actually pissed at UNM Hospital that they let me go so quick. I asked for their badge number, and I asked for their, whatever I needed, they gave it to me. I got incarcerated for putting a guy on a headlock. The charges were dropped because of my background. The judge dropped them as long as I finished a 4-month or a 4-week class while I was incarcerated. I didn't want to stay a year in probation, so he said if I stayed in jail for 4 weeks and finished an alcohol, some kind of program, which I don't do alcohol and I don't do drugs, but I had to do it anyways. It was either do 3 weeks in jail or do a year in probation. I wonder why Detective J went into the jail to see me. I don't know why he did that. Until this day, he's never still offered me any help. Since 4 years ago, he offered me help. He didn't do it then. He offered me help July 4th, never offered me help. He went into MDC and tried to offer me help and never offered me, and I've never seen him tell you, and he's not here now. So that's why I have a civil rights lawsuit going against him right now. Other than that, I lost a spot because of him, but I gained it back. I have Sergeant Griffin and well, I can't pull new things off my phone, but I could play voicemails from sergeants at night that are telling me that their officers don't know how to react or don't know how to react against me since I'm retired, and that he'll train his officers better at night how to react towards me. It's because they don't come to my calls no more. It's because I wear a secret, I don't wear an Axon body. I wear a secret device that records. So officers now that they know that I'm recording, they don't go over there. They're scared to go over there. I only get sergeants to go over there, or they don't even show up to my calls anymore. So I'm out there on alone by myself as a security business, as a 1099 private contractor, because APD does not go out there ever since these problems going on, till right now as we speak, till tonight when I go to work. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, one thing, I'm sorry, just real quick. My lawyer was going to be here today to represent me, to fly in from Dallas, but tragically, his wife died on Monday. So I gave him props to be here, that's why he was gonna be here with me. I let Valerie know about that, with that. So that's the reason why he's not here with me.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. I appreciate it. And I'm, sorry to hear about your
I
lawyer's wife's
know.
passing. That's
Trust
very
me,
tragic.
it was rough.
Board members, do we have any questions for Mr. Lopez? I do have one, just because I'm curious, and this is not to introduce any new evidence, but you were saying you had the video evidence. Did you ever give that to APD or to?
Yes, I sent it, I sent the audio to where the officers went to my house on July 4th. All of a sudden, I've never seen him, and I had to tell Detective Eisner, take off your sunglasses. That's you. And he said, yeah. I said, where's the other clinician at? And Detective J said, oh, we go through people all the time over here. I said, oh, what a coincidence. I said, well, I haven't seen you in a while, and it just went off from there.
And
It wasn't until then, they pretended to turn on their body cameras, but I don't know where their body camera's at.
For not just the July 4th, but just all the interactions you said that you record, did you give all that information to the CPOA?
No, my lawyer told me to keep that, and I have, by law, I can download the police body camera. So I wanted to make sure that they matched up to what I have, and a lot of it doesn't match up. They cut off of a lot of it. And another thing I want to say is, when I was getting arrested at my house, I asked for a sergeant, and I asked for paperwork to show why you guys are arresting me, because we're on private property. Why are you arresting me? They never gave me a reason. I specifically asked for a sergeant to come and ask me. A sergeant never came to me. And I have audio, I also have audio from my neighbor, a couple's trailers down, that they were bashing me and talking really bad about me, and they didn't know that they were being recorded. And that's the sergeant.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Awesome. All right. So the next up will be the 10 minutes for the CPOA. So Mr. Lopez, if you want to sit, take a seat for us, and we'll just continue with the process here. So Executive Director McDermott, the 10 minutes for the CPOA starts now.
Okay, thank you. So one thing I would like to clarify is a decent amount of what was talked about here is blending a variety of dates. So this investigation only looked at the date of July 8th, which was the complaint that he had filed for this specific encounter when officers came to his home and wound up taking him to the hospital. So that is exclusively what this covered. All the other things about previous interactions, I think it was 2022 is some of the phone calls that he's talking about, and then most recently this July incident. So just to clarify that is only for this. So when Mr. Lopez filed his complaint, he had alleged that people did not introduce themselves. The OBRD shows that he was introduced to all the individuals present. There were not as many people as he thought there were present. There was, I believe, 9 APD personnel. There were no marshals. Everybody was in plain clothes with the what they call outer carrier type vest, or bulletproof vest. So that was not a big outlying of personnel that way. When the officers came to the home, they were speaking with Mr. Lopez per the own body recording. There was a lot of back and forth. He was upset about the previous interactions, that he didn't receive the help. The detective explained, well, you told us to F off, so we basically didn't engage with you. You didn't want to have services at that time. So there was the reason why they were there, why the police were there at that point, is there were basically a list of several concerning incidents that Mr. Lopez had been involved in as a security guard, as a private security guard, where individuals had called and complained, and there was reports, and there was an escalation of behavior that concerned APD. And so when that type of a situation occurs, they send CIT individuals out to make an assessment, determine if there needs to be anything mandatory that's done or just to talk. And at that point, based on the totality of circumstances, Detective J and with the others there present, decided that there was enough for a detaining and involuntary transport to the hospital for state statute 43110, and that is basically what occurred. There was a sergeant present. The sergeant, there's nothing on the on-body recording that shows that Mr. Lopez demanded to have the sergeant talk to him or provide paperwork. There was at the latter part a statement where he said, "Is a sergeant present?" And the officer acknowledged, yes, there was a sergeant present. Some of the other complaint that was at least addressed, not here, but things like the house wasn't secured. The officers did make sure that the house was secured. Regarding the introductions, like I said, I already covered that that he was introduced to the individuals. He was taken to the hospital, again, per 43110. He had complained at the scene about a previous shoulder injury, so they did put him in 2 handcuffs to accommodate that issue. He had informed the officers that he was going to file a complaint. The officer said fine. He was concerned about that they would not stand in a certain place in his home for his home cameras to capture certain things. The officers did explain we're all recording, which they were. There were full recordings for the encounters that they had with him. Took him to the hospital, turned him over there, and what the hospital does after that is, again, beyond APD, beyond our investigation role. It is only the detention is the issue at question, and based on the information that was provided in the totality of the circumstances, the state statute is what applied for the reasons to do the detention. So. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Executive Director. Board members, any questions for the CPOA? No? Awesome. Thank you so much. Next up, again, we'll have the APD Representative Major Collins. And again, Major Collins, just new record. Let's restate name and rank, and then 10 minutes. So your 10 minutes starts now.
I will. Thank you, Chair and board members. Major Collins, James Collins. I'm the Deputy Superintendent in the Office of Police Reform. The case came to professional integrity where Commander Sean Waite, who's the initial reviewer of the findings of the CPOA, reviewed this case, and the 2 findings that were provided to him were unfounded on both SOP violations. He reviewed it. I reviewed it. We agreed with the CPOA. We found the investigation was thorough, complete, and reached the correct finding.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thank you, Major Collins. Board members, any questions for Major Collins? No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Mr. Lopez, if you would want to come back up, you have 5 minutes as a rebuttal to either the anything that the CPOA had to say or the APD. So your 5 minutes starts now.
They did come with tactical, like she said, but like I said, I don't know reason why. There was no warrants or nothing like that. I don't understand the medical part of that, what she was saying. Everything that she's saying about there was 7 incidents or whatever, that's hearsay. If there was people calling the cops, I would have been in court and I would have had a crime, I would have had misdemeanors or everything like that. We can't go off hearsay. You know what I mean? They didn't lock my doors. I had to get my neighbors to lock my doors. It's on camera. I don't know why she's saying that. Everything is on camera. So, and I did ask for a sergeant there. I asked for a sergeant while I was sitting in the back of a cop car. So if the cop car is recording, it should be recording. I specifically asked for a sergeant. I'm a retired correction officer. I'm not going to talk to a petty officer. I'm not making him download. I'm just saying I want to talk to the highest person there. He didn't show up. And it says me in the back of a cop car. They don't show no video of me in the back of a cop car. It's empty. All the other videos show me in my house, everything outside of the house, everything taking me to UNM. They don't show me in the back of a cop car talking. There's no video of the police there. So I did ask for a sergeant to come to the cop car. He never came. I did ask for double things because right now I was in a car accident. I have a torn rotator cuff, and Hurt Colbert is actually my lawyer right now. So they did do that for me, and that's why I asked for double handcuffs as we speak. And when they took me to UNM, Detective J said that I was, what really pissed me off was, and I went there today to talk to UNM and got the names and got in my patient portal and everything and got the names and so I could get them and bring them to court. I didn't appreciate Detective J saying that when they picked me up at my house, he didn't say that at the house on body camera, but on body camera at UNM, he's saying that I'm hallucinating, that I talk to myself. He's saying a whole bunch of stuff. I've never been diagnosed like that. I don't have no mental, nothing like that. And so I made sure to go get their cameras from over there, which they allow me to have there in that little area that they have there. And it says it. And they finally gave it to me. It took me a couple of weeks to get it. My lady's a nurse. You have to go through a patient portal. It takes a little legal things to do it. I worked some ways to get it, but I got video aux of in there. And I don't know if they turned their body cameras off in that area after a certain point, but I listened to all the body cameras when they did it. But what I have, I don't see no cops around what they gave me. So, I didn't appreciate him telling me that I'm hallucinating and all this fake stuff when he's not a doctor.
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Lopez.
it.
I appreciate it. Board members, any final questions? Nope. Then, Mr. Lopez, we're going to go into closed session, so if you want to take a seat, and then we'll come back after deliberation. So with that, I make a motion that the board convene in closed session as authorized by the Administrative Adjudicatory Proceedings exception for the Open Meetings Act for the limited purpose of discussing the matters presented in CPC 143-25. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Brillo, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz?
Approved.
Member Budenaro?
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Brillo. I make a, excuse me, I make a motion to come out of deliberation for CPC 143-25. May I get a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Spurlock, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budinaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Spurlock. Mr. Lopez, do you want to come back up to the podium for us? During our deliberation, we have determined that the appellant has not met the criteria for overturning the findings of the CPOA in specific regard to the complaint on 7/8/2025 for the, and that is around 1-1, the APD professionalism. And so we had to only talk about that particular complaint day. So that is why we're specifically citing that. So with that, I do make a motion that we uphold the findings of the CPOA director for CPC 143-25. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Perla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budinaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla. Mr. Lopez, you will be getting a written letter of the findings from this board within the next 30 days. I do greatly appreciate you being here and raising this to our attention and coming here with your time. So I greatly appreciate it. Thank you
Thank
so
you all.
much. Have a great rest of the evening.
Have fun retiring or wherever you're going.
All right. With that, it concludes the appeal section of our business. With that, dinner break? I am making a motion to go to dinner break as allowed.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Perla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budinaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla, and we will be going on dinner break. Be back shortly. I make a motion to come back from dinner break. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Member Budenaro. Ms. Brillo, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Brillo. Next order of business is the serious use of force cases. The first case up is APD case 25-002-1682, presented by Member Budenaro.
Thank you, Chair. This incident took place March 17th of 2025, approximately 2018 hours at 221 Unser Boulevard Southwest. On that date, officers were dispatched to the Murphy Express and the Southwest after reports of a male identified here as Mr. S was inside of the store walking in a cooler and refusing to leave. An employee reported that when asked to leave, Mr. S lifted his shirt and brandished a firearm in his waistband. Officer 2 was the first to arrive at the scene and contacted Mr. S on the north side of the building. While giving verbal commands, Officer 2 drew his department-issued handgun and pointed it at Mr. S after observing him reach toward his backside and refuse commands to show his hands. A dark object was then seen sliding down Mr. S's leg and striking the ground, which officers believed to be a firearm. This show of force with a handgun was later determined to be within APD policy. Officer 1 arrived shortly afterwards and deployed with a 40 millimeter launcher, while officers used the patrol vehicles for cover and established a force array. Officer 1 raised the launcher towards Mr. S as a show of force, which was also determined to be within policy. Mr. S continued to ignore commands and eventually sat on the curb with his hands resting in his lap. Officer 1 believed Mr. S could still be armed and announced 40-40-40 before discharging a 40 millimeter round, striking Mr. S in the chin. The impact caused a laceration, swelling, and a fractured mandible. Mr. S was taken into custody and was cooperative after his arrest. Medical care was provided. No officers were injured. Mr. S was charged with aggravated shoplifting, resisting or evading police, concealing identity, a felony in possession of a firearm, and an outstanding felony warrant. The use of force findings, the investigation determined Officer 2, show of force, handgun in policy. Officer 1, show of force, 40 millimeter in policy. Officer 1, 40 millimeter discharge causing serious physical injury, out of policy. Investigators determined that based on the totality of circumstance, the 40 millimeter discharge was not objectively reasonable, not minimal, and not necessary. Policy concerns identified in review included de-escalation practices, use of force guidelines, as well as training considerations related to targeting and allowing sufficient time for compliance.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Deputy Director Abbasi, does the CPOA have anything to add?
Yes, Chair, members of the board, thank you. This case involved the deployment of, as Member Budinaro stated, 40 millimeter less lethal munition, which struck the subject on the face. Based on the preponderance of the evidence, the individual at the time the 40 millimeter was deployed was compliant with the officer command. There were no threats presented by him, and his hands were also visible, as it was noted in IAFT documentation. Although officers did have a lawful objective to place the subject under arrest, the IAFT determined that the use of force did not meet the policy standards of being reasonable, minimal, or necessary. Objective evidence indicated that there were additional opportunities for de-escalation, and the subject actions at the time did not justify the need to use force. It was also noted in the documentation that the officers issued commands and warnings throughout the entirety of the incident. However, the evidence indicated that no warning was given prior to approximately 10 to 12 seconds of deployment of the 40 millimeter. The application of the force resulted in significant injury to the subject, and which required medical attention for 3 days, and the force itself was called out of policy by IAFT.
Thank you, Deputy Director Abbasi. Board members, do you have any questions for the CPOA?
Not at this time, no.
So, do we agree with the findings of IAFD
Yes.
in this? Yeah. All right, then I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the findings for APD Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 25-002-1682. May I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis?
Affirmed.
Member Budinaro?
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon?
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next APD case we push back, so we're going on to the next order of business, which is the officer involved shooting case. The first case up is APD case 25-001-5152, presented by myself. I'll get my notes here. There we go. Of course, they're not in order when I need it. Officers responded to a domestic disruption involving a physical altercation. This was involved by Mr. R, and the victim was his spouse, stating that there was a history of drug use and felony convictions. Upon arrival, officers observed the subject vehicle and willingness to exit the home. Mr. R briefly exited the residence and entered the residence and eventually walked into the front yard. Following the initial investigation, the officers informed Mr. R that he was under arrest. Mr. R then fled on foot, leading to a pursuit. Officer 1 performed a waist tackle, bringing Mr. R to the ground, which was on the street. Mr. R landed on his stomach and immediately reached for his waistband, despite verbal commands and physical efforts by both officers to secure his arm. Mr. R kept his hands tucked underneath his body. Mr. R made several statements, including, "Don't make me do this, guys. Let go of my arm. I won't shoot." While attempting to apply the handcuffs, Officer 2 did observe a black handgun in Mr. R's left hand. Officers reported hearing metal clinking sounds from the weapon. Mr. R repeatedly told the officers to shoot him. Mr. R pulled his right hand out, holding a handgun in the Officer 1's body armor with the weapon. Officer 1 deployed an ECW, or an electronic control weapon. One probe was deployed as Mr. R rolled to the back. In the seated position, Mr. R grabbed a loose magazine from the ground and reached Officer 1's ECU after it fell. Mr. R maintained possession of the firearm and reached for the officer's ECU following shots were fired. After the initial rounds were shot, the officers retreated to a position behind cover in a van to maintain the scene security. Uses of force. There were 3 discharges from Officer 1, all in policy, 6 firearm discharges by Officer 2. Level 2 was empty hand takedown in policy, and 1 ECW probe in policy. And then level 1's was empty hand control techniques, pointing, a show of force at the time, and then empty hand control, all within policy. Based on the totality of circumstances, everything was reasonable, minimal, and necessary. The officers did place the handcuffs and were patted down. Medical was provided to Mr. R. No charges were filed because Mr. R was deceased on scene. No other uses of force were located for Mr. R. No tactical training, policy, equipment, or supervisor deficiencies or concerns identified, and no policy violations as well. Deputy Director Abbasi, does the CPOA have anything they would like to add?
Yes, Chair. This incident involved an officer-involved shooting that occurred during a response to a reported domestic violence call, as Member Bullianet stated. The caller reported that her husband was actively hitting her and throwing her around, prompting her to lock herself in a room for her safety. The call notes also indicated that the husband was a convicted felon and was also known to use methamphetamines. Upon arrival on the scene and after establishing probable cause for the arrest, the officers attempted to take the subject into custody. He attempted to run away, and officers pursued him and tackled him right in the street right across his house. Once on the ground in a prone position, the officers attempted to gain control of his arms in order to place him in handcuffs. During the struggle, the subject continued to resist actively by keeping his hand beneath his body. During that time, officers observed a firearm in his hand. According to the investigation, and as Member Bullianet stated, he made statements like, "Please don't do this, I don't want to do this," while continuing to resist officers' attempt to secure him. They issued repeated commands to the subject to release the firearm, which could be heard over radio, and I counted at least 14 times. They told him to let go of the gun, let go of the gun. An officer also deployed an ECW, which was unsuccessful during the struggle. After approximately a little over 2 minutes of the continued struggle, the subject attempted to move into the seated position while he was still holding a firearm. One officer attempted to maintain control of his arm, holding the weapon down. while issuing continuous commands. At that point, officers discharged their firearms while they were creating distance and seeking cover. Approximately 9 rounds were fired by the officers, striking him 6 times. He was pronounced deceased on the scene. The investigation determined the force to be in policy, the force used by officer to be reasonable, minimal, and necessary to address the threat that was presented by the subject in this case.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Board members, do we have any questions? No. Do we find, or do we agree with IFD's decision in this being in policy? Yep. All right. Then with that, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the finding of APD Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 25-001-5152. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Affirmed.
Member Budenaro.
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Barilla. The next officer-involved shooting case, which is APD case 25-004-3470, will be presented by Vice Chair Calderon.
Thank you, Chair. With that being said, this case took place on May 29th of 2025 at 0000 hours. The levels of force that were used were level 3, Officer 1, canine apprehension, Officer 1, officer involved shooting, handgun ×5, Officer number 2, an officer involved shooting ×2 with a rifle 8 times. Level 2, Officer number 3, 40 millimeter discharge ×2. Level 1, Officer 4, 5, 40 millimeter pointing. And then Officer number 6, a rifle with a pointing. On May 28th of 2025, APD Investigative Support Unit, ISU detectives conducted surveillance on JD, who had outstanding felony warrants. Detectives located JD at Comfort Suites Hotel at 1401 Woodward Road Southeast. Due to JD's violent criminal history, prior evasion of apprehension, and the belief that he was armed, SWAT was requested to conduct the apprehension. At approximately 0:3100 hours, SWAT officers arrived at the hotel and began making announcements while the crisis negotiation team attempted contact by phone. JD briefly answered the phone but disconnected once CNT has identified themselves. At approximately 5600 hours, JD exited the room but ran back inside after officers illuminated him and gave verbal commands. JD then attempted to escape by breaking the window out of the room and jumping to the ground level outside. At the time, officers deployed a police service dog and a 40 millimeter round during the encounter. The PSD apprehended JD shortly after deployment. While on the ground, JD pointed a firearm towards officers, prompting officers to discharge their firearms. JD continued to move and again pointed the firearm towards officers, which resulted in additional shots being fired from the officers. The individual's behavior after being taken into custody, JD was pronounced deceased at the scene. Medical care was rendered. Injuries sustained by officers or individuals. Officers were not injured. However, the police service dog, Rebel, received a gunshot wound to the lower jaw and had to be euthanized due to his injury. JD had multiple gunshot wounds and was pronounced deceased at the scene. Individual was not charged due to being deceased. There was no other use of forces documented with APD for JD. Based on the totality of circumstances, the force used was determined to be reasonable, minimal, and necessary. No deficiencies or concerns were identified for tactics, training, policy, or supervision. Equipment was identified for a spare handheld radio battery fell out of an officer's pack while he was applying a tourniquet to JD, and that was officer number 3. The use of forces were investigated by IAFD and found to be objectively reasonable and within APD policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Calderon. Deputy Director Abbasi, is there anything the CPOA would like to add?
Yes, Chair, members of the board. This was an officer-involved shooting case during an operation to apprehend an individual with an active warrant. The subject had been involved in a tactical activation just a day prior to this incident, during which he evaded the police. Detectives from the Investigative Support Unit, ISU, they later located the subject at a hotel and initiated surveillance on him. A tactical team was subsequently activated to assist with his apprehension. The subject was identified through surveillance to be inside a hotel room. Crisis negotiators established contact with him through the telephone, identified themselves as law enforcement in order to persuade him to surrender peacefully. The subject hung up the call and did not engage further with the crisis negotiation team. At one point, he briefly exited the room into the hallway where SWAT personnel were positioned, and after officers announced themselves, he immediately ran back into the room. Shortly thereafter, the subject broke a back window in the room and jumped into the alleyway in an attempt to evade apprehension again. 3 SWAT officers, including a canine officer, was positioned in a hallway adjacent to the alley to prevent his escape. After the subject exited the room through the second floor window and landed in the alleyway, the canine handler, he deployed his PSD, Rebel, which engaged the subject and conducted a bite apprehension. During the encounter, one officer deployed a 40 millimeter less lethal launcher. The officer reported observing the subject holding a firearm while the PSD maintained the bite. As officer perceived the subject raising or attempting to raise the firearm toward them, 2 officers discharged their firearms. 1 round also struck the police service dog in this case. After being struck by the gunfire, the subject remained in possession of the firearm. According to the officer's statement and OBRD review, the subject continued to hold the firearm with his hand positioned on or near the trigger and oriented in the direction of the officer. At that point, one officer who was providing lethal coverage in this case, he fired 3 additional shots at close proximity toward the subject's center mass. The subject succumbed to his injuries on scene. The PSD was also rushed for emergency surgery, but he was euthanized after the surgery was unsuccessful. During the Force Review Board review of this case, questions were raised regarding operational consideration, including the decision to initiate the apprehension at the particular hotel location and whether there were any other alternative strategies that were available to monitor or track the subject if he left the area. It was noted that based on his history, they had no means to track him had he left. IFD also noted in their response that they did not interview the investigative services unit for their tactical decision to initiate the activation at the hotel. The CPOA would note that choosing a populated location such as during these encounters where public safety could be at risk should be given some additional consideration when making such tactical decisions. The discussion also referenced the subject's criminal history and statements, including that he did not want to return to jail. Per the investigative documentation, the subject had an extensive and violent criminal history, which contributed to the risk assessment surrounding the apprehension attempt at the hotel. The review, during the Force Review Board, the discussions also surrounded the final 3 shots that were fired at close proximity and whether other physical control options could have been attempted by the officer as the subject was on the ground. The IAFD representative noted that officers continued to perceive the subject as immediate deadly threat because he remained armed with his finger on the trigger. IAFD also noted that officers are not trained to wrestle with a subject who has a firearm. So based on the preponderance of the evidence and the totality of the circumstance, the IAFD determined that the use of deadly force was consistent with department policy and the officers' actions were reasonable, minimal, and necessary to address the perceived threat that was presented to them during this incident. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Abbasi. Board members, any questions? No. Do we agree with the findings of IAFD? All right. Then with that, I make a motion that the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board affirms and upholds the finding of APD Internal Affairs Force Division investigation for APD case 25-004-3470. May I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Barilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianis.
Approved.
Member Budenaro.
Affirmed.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Affirm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perillo. The next order of business is the reports from the CPOA-B subcommittees. The first one up is the Ad Hoc Rules Committee presented by myself. This meeting was held on February 26th with Vice Chair Calderon and myself. We'll actually be presenting the policies and procedures here in the next area. Right now, there is not another subcommittee or a next meeting set, so the next meeting is TBD, pending also new board members too. Any questions on the subcommittee report? All right. The next report up is the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee by Vice Chair Calderon.
Thank you, Chair. A meeting was held on March 5th of 2026 at 11 a.m. The report from subcommittee will be presented down the agenda, and the next meeting will be scheduled for April 2nd of 2026 at 3 p.m. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right. Next order of business is discussion of possible actions. First one up is proposed CPOA-B policies and procedures, presented by myself. Well, first up, Deputy Director Abbasi, were there any public comments around?
No, he is not here right now. And no, we did not receive any commentary from public, as I'm aware of, regarding the rules.
Perfect. Board members, do we have any questions? So the purpose of this is to approve the proposed CPOA board policies and procedures to forward them on to City Council. Nope, good. Do you all agree we should send it on currently as written to City Council? Then I make a motion that the CPOA-B forward the policy and procedures as they are currently written to City Council for their approval. May I get a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Perla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budinaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla. Next order of business is board training requests. So I know we've already did the, council.
Hey, Mr. Chair, since the board, pardon me, voted to approve the rules and move them on to City Council, perhaps because I believe this is what was done last time, the board should go ahead and move to disband the ad hoc committee, which can be reformed for the next rule review session.
Thank you, council. That's actually a good call out. So with that, I make a motion to disband the ad hoc rules subcommittee. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Perla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Bolianitz.
Approved.
Member Budinaro.
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Perla, and thank you, council. All right. Now on to the board training requests for updates. We have already done the drone and SWAT, so I believe I want to kind of create a list, at least for the record, for the CPOA, so at least we can start trying to prioritize the next trainings up. So the ones that I have going for right now is the APD records request and how that's working. I believe, Vice Chair Calderon, that was yours. And then the forensic unit. Was there any other ones that we wanted to add? Do we want to change the priority? I just want to please put it out there for continued training.
I have no additional at the moment.
Okay.
I'm indifferent to the priority.
Doesn't really much matter, but yeah, I'd love the forensics first.
Cool. All right. So then let's, so for the CPOA, and I don't think we need to take a vote on this, is let's move the forensics above APD records for the next training, hopefully Q2 at some point. Can calendar year Q2 at some point, if
And
that would work.
can I ask you if you could be a little more specific of what aspect of forensics you're kind of curious about? Because there's a big umbrella there, so kind of wanting to know what you're after, so I can get the right people.
It's the same one that we went through in the civilian
Do
police
we,
academy.
I
Not the
mean,
whole full-blown one.
do we want like criminal, or, I mean, do we want cyber forensics? Do we want?
Criminal fingerprinting,
As because you have, like knife-ins with guns, you
Yeah,
have
like
forensics with,
NCIC, yeah.
so it's a big thing, so just kind of if you want to, and if you want to think about it, but just,
Can we
if
do
you
a-
have an idea.
How about general overview?
yeah,
And
the
then
general
break down from
overview,
there.
that show the, well, not only the fingerprinting, but the, what is it, the spray.
I know what you're talking about, exactly
Yeah.
the name of it, yes.
They called it luminol in the
Oh,
movies.
yeah.
That
okay.
thing. They
So
don't
just a
use
general
luminol.
overview of CSI and forensics type of issues?
Right.
Is
Yeah.
that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that may be the case for most, right? As we go through them, I believe we'll see if there's additional clarity that we want, then at that point we can request additional. And more specifics at that point, I think.
Yeah, I think we don't know what we don't know to even go down like what we want to look at.
Yeah, because we did that with SWAT, and
Yeah.
we got down to,
Well, yeah,
Drone.
which we got down to drone because that's under bomb squad.
yeah.
Uh,
And we did the same thing for firearms.
Yeah.
And we did that with the range and all that different stuff. So I think we start very broad and then go deeper as needed.
Okay, so general forensics, you want that next, and then you'll address anything beyond that. But APD records is kind of, sounds like on the next
Q3?
list.
Q3?
Q3 probably?
And then I believe, Member Budnaro, correct me if I'm wrong, at some point you had said K-9, is that another one that you're wanting, or has that been resolved more?
I thought about K9, but I also thought about RBC.
And you had RTCC at one
No, that's
point,
true. No, not RTCC.
Oh.
RBC.
RBC, reality-based?
Yes.
Oh, okay, which you've had some of.
We've had
but-
some,
Yeah. I mean, it's fresh in my mind, but I loved it.
yeah.
Okay, so, and reality-based training might be better to wait until, for sure that APD's use of force policy is actually passed and
Yep.
trained
I was
to,
just
so that
thinking
might be down the road.
Q4 is what I was thinking, Q4, Q1.
So forensics first, records next,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you, Executive Director. Are we good with that? Board? I don't think we have to take a vote. No. Okay. So on to APD policies by Mr. Gabe Reamer.
Can we take over?
Yes, since he's not here. Oh, sorry, he's right in front of it. Sorry, you're normally up there.
So Gabe, real quick, so I know we have no recommendations for this one.
Yes.
So let me go through the same thing as I did for the subcommittee. Let me go through the no recommendations portion, and I know you want to talk about a couple of them just for informational, correct?
Actually, I just have, I excluded that stuff. I kept it just for the subcommittee meeting, but I'd be happy to go into the stuff for the no recommendation policies if you'd like. But I have one response for APD to share, and that's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you go how you want to. Just let me do my portion, and then if you feel like sharing the whole spiel, you can. If you don't want to, that's okay. So let me do that. Okay. So there's no recommendations for SOP 1-30 Community Ambassador Program, SOP 1-70 Open Space Unit, SOP 2-23 Use of Canine Unit, SOP 2-44 Traffic and Roadway Services, SOP 2-62 Criminal Background Investigations, SOP 2-94 Drone as a First Responder DFR Program, SOP 2-114 Foot Pursuit, SOP 3-32 Performance Evaluations, SOP 3-52 Policy Development Process. There are no recommendations from the CPOA subcommittee or from the CPOA for these policies. Mr. Reamer?
Actually, yes, there are 2 points I'd probably like to touch on because I think they're just interesting and worth noting. When it comes to SOP 294, Drone as a First Responder Program, I would want to say that the last time this policy came through review was in June, and they were in their beta phase. As I talked in PPRB in our most recent meeting, they're out of the beta phase, but APD is still working on, has primary focus on finding more pilots. So just something to keep an eye on there, and something that's developing, but the program's up and running and out of beta phase. The next policy I just want to touch on, because it's just so important to us, is SOP 352 Policy Development Process. Now, there were a lot of changes and edits made to this policy because of there was a lot of removal of the CASA language that was once there, but I think it's important to note to the board that the process that you guys use and we use to make recommendations has remained the exact same. So. And that's all the big topics for the no recommendation policy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Reamer and Vice Chair Calderon, I appreciate it. Other board members, any questions? Nope. All right. On to the next order of business is the election of the chair, which, no, oh, I thought we did. But it's a standing item, so do we have any responses to?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about it. It's not a board recommendation. It's just something that wasn't made on the PPRB record. I mean, it was, but I submitted a written recommendation afterwards. So if you'd like me to talk about it, I'd be happy to.
Sure. Yeah, I just saw standing items.
Yes,
there wasn't
sorry,
anything
yeah.
underneath, so I just thought it was like, oh, okay, just sorry. Yes.
Yes, so for SOP 268, interviews and interrogations. So thanks to the investigative staff and the CPOA, they were able to forward me a complaint we received from the Public Defender's Office, an attorney, that alleged in part that APD CID detectives interviewed an individual at the MDC in view of other detainees, apparently from the pod was the claim, and he suffered physical harm as retribution from other detainees for being seen speaking to the police. So I brought this forward in PPRB, and I was rather naive. I knew that since this was at the MDC, there was going to be overlap between policies and what personnel responsibilities and authority there. But since I was naive to it, I thought to try to prevent this potential issue and future allegations of this type, that I recommended that 268 include explicit language directing that APD conduct such interviews in a setting that is as private as possible. Since this discussion was pretty involved and it required kind of referencing a specific complaint that the CPOA received, it was decided that it was probably better for me to submit it in writing afterwards, reference that complaint so APD could look into it. And so that's what I did, and we were able to get a more concrete response from APD because of it, which was interviews are conducted at the MDC on a regular basis. And although sometimes inmates claim other inmates' communication is conducted to inform on criminal activity, this is largely handled by jail personnel. MDC SCIU helps with this. The MDC limits how and when APD officers can interview inmates. We generally have no control over the environment that inmates are interviewed. Basic interview techniques are designed to overcome some concern with this topic, however. All instances of claims by inmates cannot be overcome. It is also common that interviews by detectives are conducted after contacting the inmate's attorney. This does provide them with the information necessary to assist with any concerns they have prior to the interview. So it was effective in getting a more concrete response from APD, because in PPRB it was, they were very attentive of the concern that we were bringing forward, but the author at the time didn't have a concrete answer for me, whether he was going to accept it, put it in policy, or just say, actually, that's all MDC's responsibility, which it seems to be the case here. More discussion went into this in the subcommittee meeting. We actually looked into the validity a little bit of the complaint. And according to the 3 detectives that interviewed him, they said it was a private setting. Looking at it did seem to me, just based on my personal opinion, as a fairly private setting, and not something that APD had any control over. So just to close that circle on that, and out of my own curiosity, I'm in conversations with someone at MDC trying to figure out what their policy specifically is on this, because they don't have any public information posted on it. They do have a lot of public policies related to PREA, which is the sexual assault prevention within jails, but nothing about this general concern of privacy, not publicly posted at least. So out of my own curiosity, I'm going to try to seek that down, but of course, we don't have, at least our office does not have the means to compel Bernalillo County to produce information for us. So I will do what I can to get as much as I can, but that's where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reamer, I appreciate all the work that you do and what you're doing on this, so that's awesome. All right, on to the next order of business now, the annual selection of the new chair. So again, this is our annual thing we have to do. So I nominate the current vice chair, Member Calderon, as the new chair. Can I get a second?
I second.
Thank you, Member Budinaro. Ms. Brilla, can I get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, so you nominated, but I don't think you need a vote for the nomination. Is that what we're doing?
I get the second, so now I'm just doing the vote. Council?
Mr. Chair, my understanding is there was a nomination, it was seconded, so now you're going to take a vote on electing the position of chair.
Correct. And I thought that was the motion. So I make a motion that Aaron Calderon becomes the new chair. May I get a second?
I still second.
Thank you, Member Bunaro. Ms. Burla, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Chair Boyanitz,
Approved.
Member Budenaro,
Approved.
Vice Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you want
Motion
to switch
passed
seats?
unanimously.
No. I get the last part. Okay. Moving on to next item of business will be election of the vice chair. I make a motion, sorry. I nominate Member Buzanato to be the vice chair for the CPOAB for the next year. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Simple as that.
You don't try to pronounce my last name.
I don't want to mess up right now because I'm all flustered now. So with that being said, Ms. Badala, can I get a roll call vote for the nomination or approval of the nomination for vice chair?
All right. Member Boyanitz,
Approved.
Member Budenaro,
Approved.
Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Badala. It threw a wrench in all of this. Like, I was not prepared for this. I knew, but I wasn't prepared. Moving on to next agenda item will be committee assignments. First one will be the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee. With this being said, I would like to delegate both Member Buzanato and Member Boyanitz to the subcommittee. The good thing's a delegation. And the reason being is because, as being the chair, I'm not going to do that dual role. And then once we get the new board member on, we can reassess it at that point and see what would work best, right? And at that point, when you guys go meet for the Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee, y'all will determine the chair and the vice chair. Obviously, there's only two people, so one of you has to be the chair. But I'll let y'all hash it out in there at that meeting next month on, when is it? April 2nd. Any contesting to that?
Oh, I absolutely contest.
Well, you get on choice.
You've been voluntold.
CPOA? Council? Nobody? Cool. Good. Awesome. Fabulous. Moving on to the Ad Hoc Audit Committee. For the Ad Hoc Audit Committee,
So, wait,
it running?
let's go back to the last one. So
Yeah.
the Policies and Procedures Review Committee is not PPRB. You are aware of that, right?
correct. PPRB is the next one.
Cool, okay. I just, the way you said it, I just thought it was PPRB. Okay.
No, PPRB is a different one. On
Yeah,
Wednesday
okay,
is
yeah.
separate, yeah. Ad Hoc Audit Committee, when was the last time they met?
Mr. Chairman, that committee meets semi-annually.
Semi-annually. Okay, thank you. Do we have to delegate somebody right now? Okay. So can we just table it until we get back to that on a semi-annual basis? Because at that point, we can, different members, hopefully.
Correct. Pardon me, correct. You don't need to table it. You
Okay.
can just address it at a future meeting.
Okay. Since they meet on an annual, semi-annual basis, we'll address it when we come back for that next one, and delegate members to be part of that. Moving on to the next agenda item will be the delegation of board members for the APD Policy Development Committee, which is the PPRB, which meets weekly on Wednesdays via Zoom. Correct? Perfect, thank you. Ideally, this discussion, ideally we want someone that's in our policy subcommittee to be on that. So Member Wymark was on it throughout the last year as she was on the policy committee. We can keep that standard or we can change it as well, and share the love if we want to. How do we feel about that? Could either be one of you two or it would be me at this point.
I was for Chairman, for Weimar. No.
So, do either
Yeah,
one of you want
that's
to do
fine
it?
if we can,
One of you two?
yeah.
Okay. Do I have to delegate someone right now at the moment, or can I just say defer it off to the subcommittee, and at that point they can decide it and report back to the board?
I mean, basically, the meeting happens every week, and we do have to make sure that there is enough for quorum. So it would be ideal if you could select someone now, otherwise they'll be short.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So
Mr. Chairman,
you could always reassess it, though, when you get more members on to reconfigure it, but.
Okay, thank you.
and just to remind you, the ordinance does state that delegation of this position will be done in March.
Okay, at a minimum, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll do it.
Would you be part of
Yeah,
it?
we'll do
Okay, so I nominate, so I delegate Member Bulunato to be on that weekly meeting on Wednesdays. What time is it at, sir? 1 to 3, over Zoom. And you have Deputy Director Abassi and Mr. Gabe Reamer on it. So that's who you partner with, and they'll,
And it usually does not last the full extent of time, but again, it is very important that the board seat is filled because it does affect quorum. So more realistically, it's only about an hour-ish, but, and it is via Zoom, and so just
Okay.
and
be aware.
of course, anything comes up, let us know. We'll get you, if you're busy or something like that, we can figure it out.
Okay.
Awesome, perfect. With that being said, we move on to the next agenda item, which would be other business. Does anybody have any other business before the board?
Nope.
No. Awesome. So with that adjournment, we're next for the next agenda items. The next regular scheduled board meeting will be held on Thursday, April 9th of 2026. With that being said, I adjourn the meeting tonight. And that's it. Thank you. We don't have to. You said the last time we don't have to vote on it. Do you want me to, council? Do you want me to file a motion for it? Okay. I make a motion that we adjourn the meeting for today. May I get a second?
Seconded.
Ms. Varela, may I get a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Bolianitz,
I'm not vice chair. That would be Member Budnaro. Approved.
Member Budenaro.
That's Vice Chair Budnaro to you.
Yes. That's the vice chair.
All right. Member Bolianitz,
Approved.
Vice Chair Budenaro,
Approved.
Chair Calderon.
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Congratulations to your new position.
Thank you, Ms. Varela.
You're welcome.
Thank you all, and have a great night.